I'm delighted to know you keep score, Kim, because I'm a frustrated architect come engineer, so the keeping score part certainly is something that doesn't stray too far from my attention. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to not only be here, but to see so many familiar faces. Ottawa is a bit of a cozy town, but it's nice to see many of my colleagues from the Mental Health Commission, both at the board and advisory committee level, and of course many senior staff, and many of the folks in the mental health community in Ottawa who remain diligent, active, and unwilling to let this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which is the work that's being done now across the country. By in part, I think the catalyst was the work that the Commission started so many years ago, but certainly there are many pioneers in this room which we all bow to for their efforts long before the Commission was struck 3 years ago. I'd also like to, and Ottawa is a town that depends on the generosity of many sponsors, and Kim was very kind to acknowledge all of those, and so let me also recognize that events like this, which are so important, don't take place without the generosity of our many sponsors, so thank you for that. In my capacity as a member of the board of the Mental Health Commission of Canada, as Kim properly points out, I have been asked to speak to you, to open the symposium on the topic of eradicating stigma. I'd like to begin by sharing a story that's very personal to me, but I'm afraid one common to many families and many universities across Canada, not least Carleton University. When young adults begin their university years, the pressure to perform in a competitive academic environment, coupled with a new life away from family, often stirs deep anxiety. The combination of new pressures and experiences can trigger, for those who are predisposed, the first symptoms of a mental illness. Lack of widespread awareness for how to identify the early signs of mental illness often inhibits getting treatment, leaving many young adults to endure their first episode feeling frightened, alienated from their peers, and vulnerable. My brother Peter's mental health began to unravel while a first-year student at the University of Western Ontario. Well, not until years later did my family fully understand the extent of his illness. In the spring of 1987, a dramatic slide in Peter's academic performance and irregular behavior signaled that all was not well. Until final exams, Peter's studies were near perfect. By the middle of second term, distracted thoughts and an inability to concentrate produced exam scores that shattered his final grades. His descent into mental illness hit at the very heart of a good student's worst fear, failure. My brother returned home that summer very defeated. Somber reflection on the events of his final months as a freshman produced few answers. Given our family's then naivete, a rational explanation was not obvious. As summer lumbered along, my brother's frustrations and fears grew stronger. His dreams of a career in medicine or dentistry became very uncertain. And he and we returned to one very painful question: what happened? What happened? The summer following first year was a difficult one for my brother, to be sure. He wrestled with the injustice of how his once nimble mind had suddenly become his burden. He sat for hours, a very vivid memory for me, on the Chesterfield of my parents' living room, his math and science textbooks scattered around his feet, seized with reassembling the knowledge that had inexplicably escaped him. He was determined to prove, if only to himself, that his mind had not betrayed him. And while Peter on several occasions did attempt to return to university, his post-secondary years would end very painfully. In his years since university, my brother has fought courageously towards recovery, establishing himself as a successful entrepreneur and a productive member of society is my proof that strength of character and the unwavering support of family can help overcome even the most difficult of life's challenges. But Peter's journey would transform my family forever. First strengthening, but then stretching, but then strengthening the bonds of unconditional love and support. But my brother's journey, while emotional, has awakened me, and everyone in this room, I dare say, to the insidious stigma faced by 20% of Canada's population. On many occasions, along my brother's journey to recovery, the stigma of mental illness isolated him from those who loved him most, contributing to a period of very challenging times. And though Peter, with the support of his family, found the treatment encouraged to claw his way back to wellness, the stigma of mental illness burdens many families with very tragic outcomes. Any university community in Canada is familiar with just how tragic, and in particular Ottawa families, the very courageous Richardson family, who many of you will know, will forever feel the tragic results of stigma. While unnecessary, Canadians are paralyzed by stigma each and every day. And adding to the very real feelings of shame and guilt is the added indignity many feel further stigmatized by the very healthcare professionals who deliver their care. That's both a very powerful and a very dangerous message. And that's precisely why very early in the development of the Mental Health Commission of Canada, eliminating the stigma of mental illness was identified as a priority to be addressed immediately. The history of stigma is a long one, a much longer history than our commission. Stigma dates back to ancient Grecian times when slaves were branded to signify ownership. Mercifully, the world no longer tolerates that one person can own another, but yet the insidious effects of stigma have metamorphosized, now burdening many segments of society. The stigma surrounding mental illness is perhaps the most powerful. As psychiatrist Peter Byrne wrote, shame can override even the most extreme of symptoms in people with a mental illness. And shame is not only an unwelcome emotion, but it prevents people from seeking help when they need it most. In its crusade to eradicate stigma for all Canadians, the Commission is blessed to have Simon Davidson, CHEO's Chief of Psychiatry, leading our Child and Youth Advisory Committee. In his testimony before the Senate Committee, the committee that authored the now well-known report, Out of the Shadows at Last, Dr. Davidson asserted that we have learned that is relatively simple to destigmatize mental health among youth. I do not think the same is true among adults. Sadly, Simon is absolutely correct. Adults have attitudes that are far less malleable. We must work much harder to learn, to change, and to grow. Notwithstanding this truth, I was still astonished when I first learned that the stigma within the healthcare profession is a real problem. Researchers have found that the more often healthcare professionals encounter people with mental illness, the stronger stigmatized their attitudes become. Given that many healthcare professionals only see people at their lowest, though those they treat are often seen but a collection of symptoms. Often the stigma is so harmful that those living with mental illness are no longer viewed as a person but merely as a label. Such stigmatization is manifest in a variety of forms. For example, being told to wait in an emergency room while someone with a real problem or a real illness, in other words, a physical illness, is given treatment before you. It can take the form of a doctor denying the reality of her own mental illness or hiding the status from others. It can take the form of staff making dismissive or insensitive comments within earshot of the person they are treating. And of course, what happens within the healthcare profession is only a microcosm of what happens in the general population. In just 3 years, many have worked very hard to implement the Commission's vision and mandate to eradicate stigma in both the healthcare profession and the broader community. We have set ambitious goals. Many of these goals will be familiar to many of you, but the general promotion of health in Canada and to work with stakeholders to transform the attitudes of Canadians towards mental illness. And most broadly, to help create a society that promotes mental health and helps people who live with mental illness lead meaningful and productive lives. The job of eradicating stigma permeates every aspect of the Commission's activities. Much of the Commission's work in eliminating stigma is focused on children and youth. Prevention, as we know, is certainly more efficient than treatment. 7 out of 10 adults with mental illness issues report that their first symptoms began in childhood. So we don't only focus on children and youth, but given my early comments, eliminating stigma among the healthcare professions is another important focus. Projects we've undertaken in British Columbia at 7 local hospitals and clinics is but one example. At these workshops, people like Nikki Hylands, a woman with lived experience, describes in personal and moving stories the burdens of stigma. Nikki now helps lead art classes with therapeutic elements integrated into her work. The BC workshops were patterned on the initiative developed by the Central Ontario LIN. The Central LIN was the first to be evaluated by our Opening Minds program, and the results are quite dramatic. Among the more than 900 healthcare professionals who participated in the workshop, the results of the post-workshop survey reported that a 25% improvement took place among those who agreed that employers should hire workers with mental illness. 4 in 10 said they'd be more willing to disclose a mental illness to a colleague. From the interior of British Columbia to Memorial University in Newfoundland, the Commission is supporting projects designed to bring together pharmacists, doctors and nurses, together with educators and people with lived experience to share, to teach, and to educate. The Commission believes that the path forward is not characterized by monologues, but indeed of dialogues. Dialogues with many people with shared experience, while truly listening to those experiences and understanding their implications. I will conclude by saying that this is one of the very important exchanges in furthering that debate, in deciding that we've had enough of stigmatizing, marginalizing a segment of society that if it were diabetes they were living with, they would be embracing them as we now do. I live in hope. I have seen in 3 years the results of the Commission's work and the work of many of the others in this room to help further that exercise. And I'm delighted to kick this symposium off because as Kim so properly points out, we're another huge step forward in getting to what we ultimately dream of, and that is a day when someone's mental illness is not going to be worn as a yoke around their neck to getting the help that they truly deserve. So thank you very much. Let's have a productive, meaningful, and enjoyable symposium. Thank you very much, Kim.